WGAL 8. Now, coverage you can count on continues. From the home of Super Doppler 8, this is News 8 at 5:30.
It is a story that's generating a lot of buzz nationwide, the Real ID Act. While PennDOT has said it's still evaluating the program, News 8 has learned it's been preparing for it since 2006. And it's tonight's top story. Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Roach. As we have told you, Real ID would establish nationwide mandates, I should say, for state-issued IDs like driver's licenses. And News 8's Matt Belanger discovered PennDOT's plans for Real ID, and Matt is here with us now. Matt?
Brian, when we spoke with PennDOT on Friday, the final requirements for Real ID were released on that day, and at that time they said they simply couldn't comment because about the program because it was just too early and they didn't know how it would affect Pennsylvanians. But we found out today that hasn't stopped them from taking action before. This stack of hundreds of pages outlines years of contractual agreements between PennDOT and Visage Technology, a company out of Massachusetts that coordinates equipment for issuing IDs. But it only takes one of those pages to question PennDOT's intentions when it comes to implementing Real ID. Page 48 of a contract extension lists one of the company's goals as assisting PennDOT with the transition required by the Real ID Act. The date at the bottom of the page, March 16th, 2006, a year and 10 months before the final requirements for the program were released last Friday.
It would appear that they have, through the contract, ceded a significant amount of authority.
Republican State Representative Samuel Rohrer is against the Real ID movement, saying it puts too much sensitive information at risk. His office is paging through the contracts to find out why Real ID information was included, while state leaders say they're still not sure where they stand on the program.
There are many, many areas of that which frankly, we are going to be pursuing answers to here.
In a statement to News 8, PennDOT says it has not made any decisions about Real ID, and the contract simply implies that Visage will assist them with the transition if that's the direction the state decides to go. That's an argument other critics of Real ID aren't buying.
Why is Pennsylvania doing it? Why has our Appropriations Committee allowed these line items in the budget, technology improvements to PennDOT, to be implemented when it's not even necessary?
Aaron Bollinger with the National Veterans Committee on Constitutional Affairs has been crisscrossing the Capitol with a handful of volunteers, working to convince lawmakers to support legislation against Real ID. Bollinger says he doesn't understand why Real ID was included in PennDOT's contract, and like Representative Rohrer, he says the program will do more harm than good.
It's like the executive has circumvented the policy-making authority of the legislature, and the legislature needs to do something about that.
Now, PennDOT says in signing the contract extension with Visage, it has committed no money to the Real ID program. And as for opponents, they've been rallying support for legislation now. Bills in both houses are still in both the House and Senate are in committee.
Long way to go on this.
Yeah, definitely, certainly.
Matt, thank you very much.